Hi everyone. I want to spend some time talking about Final Fantasy 15. I want to talk about the mechanics of the game, how the game works. I want to talk about how I feel about the game, because I have a lot to say. I have played this game for 56 hours now, and I am not giving you my ultimate final verdict, because I am still in the process of trying to get the platinum. But, 56 hours is a decent amount of time. I have completed the main story. I will not be spoiling anything, so don't worry about that. And I just want to give you my opinions of the game. That being how I felt about it going in, and how things have changed, how things have stayed the same, all that lot. And I also want to talk about what the philosophy behind this game was, I think, and how it meets with certain trends and stuff, because I do have a lot to say about that as well. Now, I also want to say, before I kick this off, if you don't agree with me, that's okay. I'm not here saying that you can't think about this game differently than what I do. For example, right, I don't really care about stories in games. I mean, I enjoy them when I play through them, but my favourite games are RPGs. I like the strategy behind them, I like the customization, I like the different challenges, and that's what I'm about. I'm about the gameplay. That's what I really like. The challenges, the strategy, the customization, etc, etc, etc. And I will be going into all of that. I will not be touching on the story. Well, actually, I might do slightly. I'll talk about it in like the process of going through the story, if you know what I mean. But I won't be giving any plot points away. I will not be spoiling anything, so don't worry about that. I'll talk about the gameplay experience of playing through the story, if you get what I mean. And so, let's kick this off by just giving you the TLDR version of how I feel about this game. I feel this game is very good. I have been having a good time with it. I do feel that it is perhaps one of the very worst Final Fantasy games I've ever played. I feel that combat-wise, it is the worst Final Fantasy combat system I have ever played. Customization-wise, I feel that it has very little depth to it. I feel that they don't focus on the characters much, and I am talking about the gameplay sense here. I feel that they really, really don't focus on the characters much. I feel that they've really minimised it. But the game does things that I really like, and I like how they've adapted certain ideas into it, and so I will be talking about both positive and negative. But let's start off by talking about my first experience playing the demos, because there was the episode to Sky and the Platinum demo that came out, and what I do not want to divulge into here is, I don't want to go into this whole thing of action-based versus turn-based. We'll probably talk about that, but I don't want to make that the key subject of what I'm talking about here, because I'm just talking about Final Fantasy 15. What is everything that Final Fantasy 15 has to offer, and I'm hoping that I can do a good job in that regards. Because I don't think that action games are inherently bad or anything like that, or turn-based games are inherently better. They're different systems, they require different skills, and to be honest, I think they're a lot more on par than what the general public think, because most people think turn-based is awful, and their explanations, I think, are really, really bad. But yeah, enough of that. Anyway, so yeah, I played those games, and the combat in those games was awful. Like, especially Platinum Demo, trying to aim the magic at the Iron Giant whilst it was trying to attack you is a total nightmare. And when games try to add the whole and I use the word in quotation marks, interactive elements, where you have to manually attack at the right position and stuff, it makes it less about your making the right decision and your ability to actually do the right thing, like press the buttons in a quick enough succession. And I really felt that about Platinum Demo. This game, however, vastly improves on that. because if I go into the options here, go to combat, there's a thing called wait mode, where what that means is that when you're fighting enemies, if you're standing still, the game will freeze, and, well, the combat will freeze. That will allow you to scan the enemies so you can see their weaknesses. It will allow you to change targets. And the way that you attack in this game is by, see in the bottom left corner there?
Eyes forward.
See,
Didn't mean to do that.
Ignis is getting on my back, so I'm changing weapons in front of his face.
Playing at mutiny, are we knocked?
Not on my ship. Knock it off.
Right, so yeah, you can press these directional buttons to change your different weapon, and that can include magic spells that you can assign to these weapon slots. And then you hold circle, and you will, whoever you're targeting, you'll continuously attack with that weapon. Sounds simple, and that's because it is simple. It's incredibly simple, and combat really hasn't got much going for it. In fact, I will see if I can get some enemies here to demonstrate to you. Right, there's a Gigantod, right? As you can see, the wait timer there is dropping down. Stats in the bottom right there. I can press R2, and this will allow me to select different items and stuff. In the left there, L1, that charge bar is for different tech abilities for your extra characters, which I'll get into that. Right, I can hold R1 and it'll scan the enemy, and it will tell me its strengths and weaknesses. So as you can see there, it's strong against lightning attacks, it's weak against ice attacks, and it's weak against spears as well. So I have a spear equipped here, so I can do that. You can also press triangle to warp strike towards them. That will cost MP. Right, so I'll do that. Right, and I'll hold circle, and I'll keep attacking. Right.
What did you expect?
Now that enemy was easy because I'm a much higher level than it. It was like level 27, and I'm nearly level 90. And yes, you don't control your other characters, you just control Noctis. But the amount of customization options is very, very limited. If I go to the customization options here, now short-term customization options is this gear, and this is it. So here for Noctis, I can equip up to 4 weapons here, and up, well, 2 accessories, but I mean it starts as 1, but you can unlock more accessory slots. I'll go into that later. And then the attire, and they will alter your stats and stuff. Go to these other characters. Right, you can equip accessories and 2 weapons. Each character has a primary weapon that they can use. So for example, for Ignis here, it's the twin swords, and his secondary one is the lances. And also in the secondary one, you can equip different spells, and I'll go into that later. And you also have a different technique, and this is it. This is like, I mean, I haven't unlocked all the techniques yet, but like, see this here? This is like pretty much the extent of how much like abilities you have for your characters. Like, this is it. And I'm not saying that quantity equals quality, because that's not necessarily the case, but I mean, what's the difference between each of these different abilities? I mean, there's not really much difference. A lot of it is just deals damage, and they level up as you use them. Right, I mean, regroup here, that's a healing one. But a lot of them are deal damage. So if I change to Prompto here, see, he's only got 4 abilities there. And Gladio, he has 4 abilities there. And as you can see to the left there, the techniques. Now, remember the charge bar that I was talking about before with the L1 during combat? If you press that and then press one of the directional buttons, you will activate one of these characters' abilities, and it will cost 1, 2 or 3 of those bars. And because they all run off the same tech bar, it really doesn't make much difference who has what ability, because what you're limited is by the total amount of techs you can use. So yeah, for short-term customization, that's pretty much it. Now, the way that it works with spells, and I think this is kind of like how they try to make up for the lack of abilities, is that you can form spells, and this is something I really like. You can form spells by spending different points here. So for example, I can put in so many points of ice and so many points of lightning, and you gather these from different like resources around the world. You soak up these different elements. So I can put in, say, like 41 points of fire and say 24 points of lightning. I can put more in and it'll become a more powerful spell. The element will change and it'll have like 3 casts there. Potency is how powerful it is, and you can also add different weapons to add different effects to it. So for example, if I had these lead and potatoes here, I just knocked the microphone by mistake there, it will change it to heal cast, which so it'll heal you whilst it's casting. And the fungoir here, which is strange that it's an enemy from Final Fantasy VIII and here it's an item, but yeah, the fungoir, it will add venom cast, so it will poison as an additional effect. And you've also got things like dual cast, so it will cast 2 spells at once, and like curse cast and all that. And you also have like double cast and like their quad cast. So you do get that variety there. And I do like how you have like a limited number of flasks and you have to use up all the ones in the flasks or empty a flask in order to be able to put something else in that flask. I think that is quite nice. So that's a thing that I do quite like, but I still feel that the effects themselves aren't really that good. In fact, if I call an enemy, it's getting quite late. As you can see in the timer at the top there, there's a Gigantoad. Right, I can go down. I've got a Unicast 3 here. I'll just cast this. Right, and it does like a big magic attack there. Magic attacks do have friendly fire, but they are really powerful, and there's an ability where you can get you AP, so that's why I like using them. But yeah, I am going to attack this. And I am burned because I am in the fire. Right. And yeah, he's dead. Right. Although, like I said, weak, low-level enemies compared to my own levels. But I was just showing you like how magic works. And as you can see, I used up the final one in that flask there. So I will have to go to my gear to knock this and equip a new magic. So I'll put that Unicast 3 there, which has 31 casts, I believe, was it? 31? Yeah, 31 casts. So I think that's how they've tried to make up for that. Now, in terms of long-term customization, what we have is the Ascension here. And the Ascension is these bunch of skill trees. And what's interesting is that the skill trees are differentiated by category rather than character. So it's not like one character will have their own skill tree. No, you've got all these different skill trees, and you have to basically spend your AP to go outwards. And characters have their own abilities like scattered around across each of them. So for example, if I go to the teamwork one here, see, this is an ability for Prompto there. Now I go there. See, that's another ability for Prompto. And down here we have the abilities for Ignis, and over here we have the abilities for Gladiolus. So it's separated by category rather than character. So for example, here we have the magic one. So here we have things like this one here, Powercraft. Enhanced potency by 10 when crafting spells. The effect of similar abilities do not stack. Right, okay. And then that's like an extra more powerful version of that. That's like an extra more powerful version of that. And so on and so forth. So these are like the magic based ones. And you got like ones for healing. And these are ones for the techniques. That's those abilities that I showed you before. Combat. These are things that like you can do in battle. A lot of them are like command abilities, like different button combinations and stuff to do things. I don't like that so much. And here we have teamwork abilities. So these are things that characters can just like do by themselves. Stats, very simple, you know, increasing stats. Exploration is for increasing, a lot of it is for increasing the rate of which you gain AP for things. So for example, this one here, increases the AP that you gain for camping. I'll go into that in a moment. And we've got one for wait mode here, which increases the effect of things during wait mode. Now, this Ascension system doesn't favour variety in the... Well, it doesn't favour variety in the specialisation sense, and they do actually try to advertise that. I think it's either during loading screens or something somewhere. They were saying like, oh, you can choose what to specialise in. But the game doesn't really enforce specialisation because the game uses this diminishing return system. Very similar to what they did with 13 in the secondary Crystariums. But what I mean by that is that abilities, like the higher up you go, the less efficient AP wise they are. So for example, if I go this one here, as you can see here, this is a second accessory slot for Ignis. It costs 16 AP to get, and this one here is the third accessory slot for Ignis, and that costs 333. And so what this enforces is, this enforces a style of play that sees each ability as sort of like on a tiering system. So you have to exhaust the lower tier abilities first in order to then go for the more powerful ones. Not that you have to, but it's better to, because you don't want to start the game, you know, by going over here and spending 333 AP for an accessory slot when you've just spent 16 for the same thing. No, you want to actually go and spend like 6 on this ability for Prompto. It's only once you've exhausted all of those abilities that you will then want to go ahead and get all of these really high-end abilities. Like, if you look here, Powercraft, enhanced potency by 10 when crafting spells, right, costs 20. Right, if you want to upgrade that to 30, it costs 99. To upgrade that to 50, it costs 555. To upgrade that to 100, it costs 999. So yeah, you do have to like exhaust the lower tier before it's effective to go on to the higher tiers. And you will not specialise this way. You will not specialise long term this way. You will specialise short term, because as you're going through the lower tier abilities, you'll think to yourself like, right, I want to get this one first, then this one, and then I'll focus on this one. So you prioritise. But you won't prioritise on the grand scheme of things. Like, you won't go, right, I want an accessory, I want to focus on accessory slots, and I'm going to get this 333 costing accessory slot. I'm going to spend another 333 on this one for Gladiolus. And it doesn't work like that. And I generally think that this is a good thing, and I think that, well, if it's like separated out so much, because I think that it's really good when, even like at the end game when you've got like loads of points, it's good to have things to spend that on. I don't like maxing out and reaching the max. I always like being able to know that I can fight things and level up more, and to have these like really expensive like slight boosts for like the late game, I think it's really nice. It's really nice to be able to continue on, even if it's just at diminishing returns. It's still really nice. Now, the issue is, at least I find, that a lot of these are passive skills, and that's fine. But and I suppose like the more actiony a game is, the more skills and abilities have to be passive due to the nature of the game. So like things like reducing MP costs of things and all that lot. And so if you look at actual like combat techniques, it's tiny. Like, the techniques that you choose between, like, you know, the ones where you press L1 and then you choose like an ability, this is it. This is it. Like here, Prompto has 4 abilities here, and then there's one here for the break damage limit on those techniques. So yeah, that is it for Prompto, and this is it for Ignis, and that's it for Gladiolus. So like actual like ability choice wise, there's very, very little going on there. And these, here it is, teamwork here, these ones are kind of like, because you don't control the characters, a lot of these are kind of like automatic. So for example, Analyze for Ignis automatically scan most enemies' weaknesses at the onset of battle, right? Lancet, there, deliver a counterattack and drain an enemy's HP with a polearm. It's very automatic things. You don't really notice these things happening a lot of the time, and they just kind of happen. So there is a lot of very minimalist combat stuff going on. Now I'm going to address this quickly, and this gets on my nerves quite a lot, so I'm just going to like brush over this, and I want to compare this to 13 because, and I suppose 12 as well in a way, but yeah, people will say with 13 like you don't control all your characters and everything, but with 13 you do have a sense of what your characters have, and you do, because you do switch between the roles, there are strict reasons to like switch between things, and you do have a sense, you do have a tight sense of what your characters are and what your characters can do. I find that with this game the characters kind of all bleed together, and when I say the characters all bleed together, I'm sure people are going to bring up Final Fantasy 8 and Final Fantasy 7 and saying, well, with those games you can equip any materia to any character, and yeah, that's true, and with it you can junction any GFs and any spells and all that to any character, but you still differentiated them when you customized them. You didn't make them all identical in that same way. And one of the ways that they try to differentiate between the different characters is through the different skills here, because each character will have like a skill. So for example, Prompto takes photographs, Ignis will cook, Gladiolus survives, I suppose, and Noctis fishes. And as these level up, they will add different effects. So the more that Ignis cooks, the more his cooking level will go up, and all that lot. The more that he cooks and the better food he cooks, he will get better at cooking, and he will discover new recipes, and you know, all of that. Like Gladiolus as well, here he will be able to find like new items out in the wild and all that, and so on and so forth. But the thing is though, is that this still does not differentiate the characters, because even though they are assigned to the characters, there's nothing tying them to the characters. Like they could switch the theme up here, right? At least to my understanding, right? They could have made it so that Prompto doesn't take photographs and Ignis doesn't cook, and so Noctis will be the cook, and Noctis would be the one who takes photographs, and Gladiolus is the one who does the survival stuff. They could redistribute these abilities in any way, and it wouldn't make a difference, because it's basically like it's your cooking skills. It's not like there's anything about Ignis inherently gameplay wise that makes cooking tied to him, because he's not the only one that eats the food. He cooks the food, but there's nothing like you will pick up like items and Ignis will discover a new recipe and all that. I can't say that without putting on the voice, and there's nothing about that ties that to Ignis, like other than his personality, I suppose. There's really nothing about these abilities and these skills that tie them to the characters in a gameplay sense. I hope I'm making sense there. And so what I'm really not liking about this game, one of the things I'm really not liking about this game, is that I'm feeling that I'm not really going anywhere. I'm leveling up, but I don't feel like I am expanding. Like, you can look at any Final Fantasy game, like if you look at all of them from 1 through 13, again not including any MMOs because I don't know about them, you can look through them and you can see that as the game goes on, the game gets more complicated. Now, when I started this game, it actually started with an element of complexity to it, and that's what drew me to it, and that's what I really liked. But the problem is that if that complexity doesn't expand and it kind of like peaks out, or it like stays at the same throughout the entire game, which I kind of feel like this game did, I think that's like a downside to it. So I mean, Final Fantasy 1, you level up, you go to new towns, you can get more spells, more options during battle, and new ways to customize your characters, and you upgrade your characters as well. Do the different, the Rat's Tail quest. Final Fantasy 2, characters, you level up spells, you can get more spells along the way, and generally speaking, I mean, I'm not sure if it's as strong with 2, but you will get like new abilities and things will expand, and it will increase along the way. Final Fantasy 3, you unlock more jobs. Final Fantasy 4, characters level up and get more abilities. Final Fantasy 5, you get more jobs, you learn more abilities, and your characters become more customizable, and you have more jobs to do as you go through the game. With 6, your party customization becomes much more prevalent later on in the game, where you have to like pick the right teams to like different characters so that their abilities work together, and you get more espers which teach different magic spells at different rates. At 7, you get more materia as time goes on. You start with like 3 materia, like you get the restore materia in the first reactor, and you've got the lightning and ice materia, and you've only got like characters with 2 or 3 materia slots. But as you go on, you'll get weapons and equipment with more materia slots, and you'll get more materia, so there's more ways to put things together in such a way, and you'll have things like the different blue materia that will interact with your materia different ways. So you really have to think more about different ways and different combinations to put them together. Same with 8, you get more and more GFs. You have to sort of junction the GFs to the different characters, avoiding the overlap of abilities as much as possible so that they can not lose out on abilities, because that's the way that it works in 8. And your GFs will learn more abilities as you go on, and you will have more refined abilities. You'll get more cards to refine. Final Fantasy 9, you'll get more weapons, you get more characters, and you can later on have more choice over who is in your party or not. You have to also, with 9, equip the passive skills, which you get more and more and more of those as time goes on, but the amount of crystals you get to be able to equip them doesn't increase at that same rate. And 10 as well, you play through the sphere grid. You start off just by going through like the straight lines, but you do get the yellow spheres to activate far away nodes, and you do get the keys to branch off in different directions. You get different like spheres that will like fill out the empty nodes, and you'll get clear spheres on the end game, and it gets a lot more complicated. Same with 12, you expand out on the license board, you get more abilities. 13, as you're playing through the game, you will unlock more roles. So you'll start with just like a Ravager and a Commando, and like a Sentinel and a Medic, and then you'll start getting Synergists and Saboteurs. And as the Crystarium expands, you'll have new areas to go to on the Crystarium, and you've got to judge the different like paths, like are the extra side paths worth it now before getting the extra expansion? Do I need that, or should I wait till I get an expansion? And even more so when you get to like the later chapters, when your party becomes more flexible and you start getting the secondary roles, which is the same thing again but more extreme. So every Final Fantasy game does this, but I'm not feeling it with this game at all. I'm not feeling like the game is getting any more complicated. I'm really not. Like, you start the game and you've got this Ascension grid here, and I mean, granted, it's nice at the start because you start and you're thinking, oh, how am I going to plan this out? Because, you know, you start the game and you've got none of these, and you're thinking, right, okay, that's going to give me health and stuff, and you've got quite a lot to think about. But you don't get more and more to think about as the game goes on. So it is really lacking in that regard, and I'm feeling like the endgame battles are involving an equal amount of strategy as the early game battles, and you know, that wouldn't be a bad thing if the customization system and the long form progression of the game had more depth to it. So that is, to me, a really big downside about this game. One thing that is a really good side, actually I should go back into the menu there, the experience system, I really like it. The way the experience system works is that you kill enemies to get experience, but that experience isn't cashed in until you sleep, and you can sleep at like a campsite or a caravan or a hotel or something, and the fancier or the most luxurious place that you sleep at, you will get a higher multiplier of experience. It'll multiply it by a certain number. Now, the higher that you go up, the higher the multiplier goes up, the cost becomes more exponential. So for example, the difference between a caravan, which is 1 point times 1.2, and the and like a regular hotel, which is a 1.5, the jump in guild it costs isn't very much. But if you look at like Golden Key, which is like a ×2 rate, costs 10,000 gil, and you look at the Alticia Royal Suite, which gives you ×3, that costs 30,000 gil. So you really have to, for lack of a better quote, put your money where your mouth is. Is that even I don't know. I might be talking nonsense there. But yeah, like, you really have to be confident in yourself and think to yourself, right, is this a good investment? And you have to like judge the multiplier, like how much extra experience will this place give me? I mean, obviously if you've got 1 experience, you're not going to spend 30,000 gil to get 3 experience instead. You're going to want to build up a large amount of experience. And I really, really like that. I think it's really nice. I think it's really interesting as well. And this also adds to the pressure to sleep, because the game has a day and night cycle, which I think in a lot of games is just there for show. But in this game, the day and night cycle does have a nice effect to it, and that is that more powerful enemies will come out at night, and also Ignis won't drive at night, so you've got less like flexibility there. You have to drive yourself, and you'll be stopped in the middle of the road by different demons that have been spawning and all that. And so this ties into the whole open world aspect of the game. Now, the open world aspect of the game I put down to, I would say, a very, very heavy amount on how much backlash there was against 13, because I think a lot of people put so much emphasis on this idea of you can go anywhere you want, you can do anything, whoa, like, right. And here's the thing, okay, I'm not saying open worlds are bad, right? They're not bad. But open worlds have a particular design surrounding them that is good for certain things that a lot of the time they're not used for those certain things. Oh, not so much that they're not used for those certain things, but rather they're disguised as such that they're there for the sake of choice and all that. But the thing is, right, a big open world like big fields doesn't have inherent level design behind it. It's just empty space. Now, you can have things there, but it itself is just empty space. There's no obstacles in that regards. And so what that means is that all the things in these open worlds are filled with icons. So you can see here, right, and this game is no exception here, you zoom in and look, oh, the icons. This is a mineral deposit, this is a food spot, this is a treasure spot, this is where you fish, this is where you can camp. And it really, if this is a word, ubiquitizes, I suppose, the function of certain instances. Like, a camp is to sleep, and for Ignis to cook, and a lightning deposit is so that you can extract lightning energy from it. And I think that when they do this, the way that they could have level design integrated into this world is by changing and having an alternate, what's the word I'm looking for, like an uneven distribution of things. Like, if you have like an area like that like has a lot of campsites, or you could have an area where there's no hotels, or you could have an area where ice deposits are very common. That adds an element of level design to it, because that way it's kind of like, oh, I want to go to this place for this and this place for that. But when you have this everything is everywhere nature, what that means is that the level, like the design of the open world, is more used for the sake of quantity of content, and that's okay, but it's not choices. It doesn't open up the world, if you get what I mean. And it's because of this as to why you have things like quests, because they can't integrate things into an open world because you can just go anywhere and that's it. And if they do that, they'd have to then get that point and funnel it down into a particular thing. Like, see here, we have like a dungeon there. Like, there's a thing down there, and in order to do that, you have to go to that point, and then you'll be access to a non-open world area, and that is where the challenges are. And so when you have like hunts and stuff that are like dotted around the map, and you go to a place, a lot of it is you go to the place, you get the hunt will appear somewhere, say like, okay, you're here, and then the hunt will, like, the enemies will appear here, right? You go there, you hop on your chocobo, right? Run towards this point, watch it, like, because the world is so big, obviously it takes a while, so you watch the number drop slowly, right? Oh, I'm so many feet away, I'm so many miles away, I'm so many miles away, I'm so many feet, you do it, and then you go back there. But this stretch here has no inherent value to it, and fast travelling whilst in this game doesn't really help that, because even if you could fast travel to anywhere from anywhere, I'm getting major deja vu right now, but yeah, if you could fast travel to anywhere from anywhere, then that like takes away the purpose of having an open world to begin with. It may as well just be a menu screen with loads of different hunts and stuff to choose from, and that's what I feel that a lot of open worlds are. They are really user unfriendly menu screens in that regard. But I think this game does kind of differentiate that kind of in, like, you know, the whole like nighttime thing, but I think it gets a bit too easy to bypass it later on, so that thing has diminished. Right, so what else is there to talk about? Tell you what, let's fast travel back to the last rest point and go to the next day. One thing that I should probably talk about is the car. People complain about the car journeys. I don't think it's as bad. I mean, it's a bit annoying, but I don't think it's as bad. I mean, it is pretty much like empty space that you're just going through. But, you know, I don't understand. Like, people will play open world games and then like have like a cursor in the distance that they'll just run towards in a straight line anywhere. Why are people complaining about having a car that will take you there? Why are people complaining about not being able to manually control the car? Like, I saw someone complain that you can't drive off a cliff. How would that make the game better? And not only that, how do you know for certain that it wouldn't make the game worse if you could do that? It's because people have these false notions of freedom. That's what it is. Yeah, this game does have quite long loading screens. Why? Ah, there. Usually there's like a bar that goes up. As for the car radio, it is nice to have those different like radio stations and like albums of different Final Fantasy music. The thing is that the thing is though that I think about it though is like shouldn't Final Fantasy 15 be about Final Fantasy 15's music? Like I want to be able to identify this game by its own features, if you know what I mean. Like, I want to be able to say like, oh yeah, this is the Final Fantasy 15 thing, but if I like go in the car, and you can do it out of the car as well if you get the MP3 player. If I can find it, yeah. Look there, Final Fantasy 1 music. Like, this is Final Fantasy 2 music. It's nice to be able to listen to the music, you know, but I think to myself, I want Final Fantasy 15 to have its own identity in a way, and I think it kind of like mixes it up a bit. They go with like the latest versions of the music, I've noticed. Right. Now, Chocobos. I'll talk about chocobos quickly. Chocobos really aren't interesting in this game because they don't.
Now.
You can, as long as you like pay the amount of money, which is very tiny, you can always access chocobos once you've got them.
See you, Slowpoke!
And all they do is make you go faster.
Chocobos.
They don't open up new areas. They don't have their own like unique abilities that like will change things.
Don't take that
It's
the
just
wrong way.
the same but faster.
I love the chocobo.
And there is, I think, one more thing that I want to touch upon before I end this. And tell you what, I'm just going to open up the menu so that I can relax and not run around whilst I talk about this. And I'm going to talk about the story, so to speak. Not the actual story itself, but the process of playing through the story. And I've noticed this, and I feel that this is like a byproduct of the notion of freedom that people have when it comes to these games. So, right, not spoiling anything, I'm not going to tell you anything about the events of the story, so don't worry about that. But what I've noticed about this game is that depth and the optional content and, you know, things that people deem as being optional or extra or stuff is different to the story. Like, it's separate, and I think this does come from a lot of like the mentality that people have. People have the idea that a game is linear if all you can do is progress the story, right? Because that doesn't address how much progressing the story entails. And like, I can go back, and again, I'll talk about Final Fantasy VII, for example, right? And as I said before, as you play through the game, you get more materia, you get more weapons that can hold more materia, and combat opens up, and you know, you'll go to new shops with new items and weapons and materia and all that sort of stuff. But people have sort of like this an idea that progressing the story is inherently itself a linear thing, and therefore in order to open up the game you have to have content that differs from progressing the story, that happens not in tandem with the story but regardless of the story. And I find that this is not really a way of opening things up, but rather just a method of choice of order, I suppose. Like, I could go to quests. Now, there are certain things, like, for example, you can only get to outside this area. Like, this area here is the only area that you can go to in the first couple of chapters. But after that, you unlock this area here. Like all this extra stuff out here. Now, from that point, you can progress the story, or you can do side quests. But because the game focuses a lot of its optionalness, if that's a word, and it focuses a lot of its openness on the idea of non-story events, what that means is that the process of doing the story itself doesn't have the things that a Final Fantasy game would have, like I said with materia and stuff in 7, or like with 6, you go to a new town because that's part of the story and you'll get an Esper. And you know, I'm not saying that there can't be like side branches and stuff, because you know, you do have Final Fantasy games where there might be like a town on the way that you don't have to go to, but it's just like, it's like on the way to where you're going and all that, but it's still like separated by story events. And I tend to find that when a game does what this does here, what 15 does, where it's either the story, which is this linear set of events with not much progressing to it, or this set of side quests, what happens is like you either enter story mode or side quest mode, and it doesn't really make a difference if you do the story first then you do all the side quests, or you do all the side quests and then do the story, because it's just, you're just doing all of these individual set events. And so the actual process of playing through the main story didn't have that level of expansion that Final Fantasy games usually have. And speaking of which, a lot of the bosses in the story mean, not all of them, but well, I'll say some of the bosses in the story are just awful. Like, I'm not going to spoil anything, but there's one boss, and it feels more like an Uncharted series of quick time events that like Uncharted would have, or something like that, and it's designed just to be cinematic. Whoa, look at all the big things that are happening. Whoa, like, I don't care, right? I will be more impressed if you give me a battle, if you give me a boss that tests my skills, and it really scrutinizes the decisions that I have made, like with what abilities I've chosen, what equipment I've done, and if it really it rewards me for thinking that I've chosen the right thing, and it really emphasizes and hammers home that point, I will have so much respect for more respect for that boss than an easy boss that has loads of explosions and loads of, you know, things flying around everywhere that you have to do a few quick time events for. Because to me, that boss is on par with a level 1 rat outside the beginning of the starting town of an RPG. It requires the same amount of difficulty, it requires the same amount of actions, so why would I think that one is any more epic than the other one? And even if it wasn't difficult, even if it was difficult, even if the bosses I'm talking about were difficult and the quick time events were really, really hard, it's still not impressive in any way, and it still doesn't really hammer home the mechanics of the game. And I feel that every Final Fantasy up until this point has done that. You will encounter new bosses that are like, right, they're going to fight you and it's going to be a proper fight. What stuff do you have equipped? What abilities have you set up? Now, they might have their own quirks, sure, and that's what makes them interesting, that's what makes them stand out, but it's still down to what you have and what you set up and how you take on the fight. And this game just, it values spectacle. And here's the thing, people say that about RPGs. People who don't know about RPGs say that about RPGs, like, it's just about pressing, like, choosing a thing and then watching the big summoning animation that takes 5 minutes. Those people who have that strong misconception about what RPGs are, if they would say that about Final Fantasy 15, they'd be right. On those instances, at least, they'd be right. Yeah, but overall, I have been enjoying this game. I really liked the experience system. At least at the start, I really liked going through, like, checking the Ascension and all that, and trying to, like, figure out the best way to get AP. And it did have some, like, nice strategy and stuff going on for it. But as time has gone on, I've really started to realise that the game doesn't give you much more than what you start with. It is just what you start with. It promises a lot of stuff to you, and you kind of think to yourself, because, you know, Final Fantasy, you'll always, like, discover new I mean, maybe I'm missing something. Like I said, I haven't platinumed this game yet. Maybe I'm missing something, but, you know, I'm 57 hours in, and I am still doing all of this stuff that I was at the start. I am still... Battles are still just as difficult as they always were. I'm not customizing very effectively, like, I'm not putting a lot of thought into my customization. There really isn't much going for it, and so I would have to say that this game is just, it's not up to Final Fantasy standards, and I hope that when Final Fantasy 16 comes along, I mean, it won't, but I hope... I know people don't like 12 and 13 and all that, but I feel that they weren't a departure as much as people think they are. I think this really is, and I just think that this game is just a big downgrade. But hey, it sold however many millions of copies, so whatever. What I say doesn't matter. Anyway, thank you for watching, I'll see you next time.